I've been involved with CUNO for the past 4 years.
It hardly seems possible that much time has passed.
I've been here since 1998.
I came on as a committee member about 8 years ago.
I have a deep interest in international affairs.
We act as a communication link between the yearly meeting, the wider circle of friends, and the work here at the United Nations.
We work across a range of issues.
We follow the process as it takes place in the UN.
So we're working on issues that are vast.
On issues that I really care about.
We bring countries together in a way that allows them to be able to talk off the record.
They can come together around a luncheon or a discussion group and actually develop relationships.
It comes with that notion that you find God in everyone.
War will not solve the problem, war is going to make the problem worse.
By quiet diplomacy, you can come to a meeting and bringing people together and suddenly see a whole change in the way that people approach things.
Most of us have heard about United Nations peacekeeping and humanitarian assistance, but the many other ways that the UN affects all of our lives are not always so well known. The UN is central to global efforts to solve problems which challenge humanity. Day in and day out, the UN and its family of organizations work to promote respect for human rights, protect the environment, fight disease, promote development, and reduce poverty. UN agencies also define the standards for safe and efficient transportation by air and sea, assist refugees, set up programs to clear landmines, and help improve the quality of drinking water and expand food production. UN headquarters in New York is where 185 countries meet to achieve consensus on solving global problems. Around the world, though, there are approximately 3,500 non-governmental organizations which work with the UN on various issues of international importance. One NGO in particular is Quaker United Nations Office, located at 777 United Nations Plaza, directly across from UN headquarters. Quaker United Nations Office, CUNO for short, has a sister office located in Geneva, Switzerland. Following the process as it takes place in the UN, CUNO representatives and committee members from both offices work on a range of vast issues that attempt to make our world a safer place in which to live. Quaker UN Office Representative Lori Henninger is co-director of CUNO New York. Her job responsibilities include economics and peace.
The United Nations is one of the few international organizations that provides a voice for developing countries as well as developed countries. Because without the voices of the many, we are diminished, we are limited, and people then are left out. The United Nations provides the opportunity for a multiplicity of voices in decision-making. The UN is an organization dedicated to ending the scourge of war. And as Quakers, being pacifists, that's absolutely critical to us. And our role here is really to support the work of the United Nations, given that it's an organization dedicated to ending the scourge of war.
The crux of what makes CUNO such an integral part in the UN process of solving global problems lies in the ideals that Quakers uphold. Much of what CUNO has been able to accomplish relies on over 350 years of consistent dedication to the concepts of freedom, justice, and peace, which remain pivotal today.
Well, I guess you have to believe it matters. First of all, friends are committed to a peace testimony. And you don't decide you're committed to the peace testimony when war breaks out. It has to be how you live your life, how you live it every day. And we have to be building those foundations of peace day by day and as in our lives. And so Friends have had a long history of involvement in international affairs. For 350 years, Friends have had a peace testimony, and they've tried to put it into practical execution into the world.
Quakers, whose official title is the Religious Society of Friends, is a designation of a body of Christians. Their fundamental belief is that divine revelation is immediate and individual. All persons may perceive the Word of God in their soul, and friends endeavor to heed it. They reject a formal creed and worship on the basis of silence, regarding every participant as a potential vessel for the Word of God. The Religious Society of Friends arose in mid-17th century England during the religious, social, and political upheaval of the English Civil War. Founded by George Fox, the movement was not intended as a new denomination, but rather as a rediscovery of original Christianity without institutional limitations. Mocked as trembling with religious zeal, Fox and his followers adopted the term Quakers as their own. Despite oppression and imprisonment, their numbers continued to grow throughout the 17th century. Missionaries volunteered in Turkey, Russia, and the New World during those first decades, and the faith has since spread around the globe. Worship presently occurs where spoken ministry arises spontaneously out of silent waiting upon the Spirit, in meetings or churches with pastors and program worship, and in combinations of both. Each congregation is autonomous, but shares experience and insight by gathering annually in geographical regions called yearly meetings, which overlap according to diversity in worship. Though methods and emphasis in worship now differ, Friends remain united and concerned for traditional Quaker beliefs and social testimonies.
Well, I think we're really here not to serve the interests of the Friends Society. We're really here to live out a testimony, a peace testimony for the world. And, it's not as if there's any sort of focused interest by Friends apart from to be servants of peace.
The Quaker UN office, located in New York and Geneva, represent Quakers through the Friends World Committee for Consultation, which has general consultation status as a non-governmental organization with the UN. Since the founding of the UN in 1945, Quakers have shared that organization's aims and supported its efforts to abolish war and to promote peaceful resolution of conflicts, human rights, economic justice, and good governance around the world.
One of the most important factors that I believe we bring is the fact that we do quiet diplomacy. We bring countries together in a way that allows them to be able to talk off the record.
You can come to a meeting and bringing people together and suddenly see a whole change in the way that people approach things.
The Quaker UN office serves as a Quaker presence at the UN, representing Friends' concerns at the international level and facilitating people-to-people diplomacy on global issues.
The most important thing to remember about the office is that it is the representative office of the worldwide body of Friends at the United Nations. One practical challenge is that our office is very small. And how can such a small office represent such diversity?
Friends' work at the UN emphasizes a patient, consensual, step-by-step process in moving toward peace and justice. Staff at both locations build contacts with government negotiators and UN staff, attend relevant UN meetings, collaborate with other non-governmental organizations, and make oral and written presentations to UN meetings when called upon. The Quaker UN office collaborates on a number of issues, and both maintain a Quaker House facility in their respective cities, where they host informal, off-the-record luncheons to promote dialogue and understanding on contentious issues. In this way, QUNO strives to help the international community solve its problems through words rather than weapons. Quaker House, a 4-story brownstone, just blocks from UN headquarters, has served as an informal meeting space for the UN community since 1953. Given to QUNO by a small group of donors to support a permanent Quaker presence at the UN, the House has become an integral part of the program work of the QUNO office.
Quaker House has this amazing 50-year history of being a meeting ground for those that can't be seen together or talk together in the United Nations world of offices and meetings, but they can come together around a luncheon or a discussion group and actually develop relationships.
The great virtue of Quaker House in relation to all of that has been having this kind of space that's so close to the UN, but is outside the UN, where in fact people can feel comfortable to kind of leave behind all of the formal posturing and actually get down to the brass tacks of what human relatedness, how human relatedness relates to the problems that their governments or their people are having.
So much of diplomacy is informal. It is behind the scenes, let's face it. Governments don't necessarily put all the cards on the table at any given time. Governments also need to sound each other out. They need to test things. And if they don't have the space to do this, when they get into the formal negotiations, they can get stuck and mired in very rigid positions.
Over the years, the luncheons and meetings held at Quaker House have helped move many issues of concern to Friends forward on the UN agenda. Jack Patterson and Lori Henninger are a husband and wife team who live and work at Quaker House.
The house is such an incredible setting and tool, really, for our way of working, which is to facilitate these off-the-record conversations. Because it's so important that when diplomats come to meetings, they're coming to a house, they're not coming to another meeting room.
We always serve food because food greases the wheels of good conversation. People serve themselves by and large, and we don't sit around a table. People sit in our living room. It's completely different than the UN environment, where the diplomats are sitting behind a desk with their name, their country plate up front, and they're having maybe some informal conversation, but they're all reading their formal statements. We know we're getting somewhere in our meetings when we hear people say, "We could never say this on the floor of the UN." Then we know that people are beginning to loosen up a little bit. They're not holding to position. And I think that that's one of the key things that we can bring to the negotiation process, to helping governments and NGOs and Secretariat through these sticky moments, is to help people see each other not as positions, but as human beings.
In addition to providing space for informal luncheons with diplomats and UN staff, Quaker House is a center for seminars, workshops, committee meetings, and Quaker hospitality. Friends and Friends organizations in the United States and worldwide make use of Quaker House facilities as they learn about and participate in UN activities. By both collective action and individual leadership, Friends have altered the character and concerns of United States politics. Quaker actions have provided strong foundations for the Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights, many state constitutions, and the United Nations Charter. One of the major accomplishments of the Quakers was their efforts in creating the Law of the Seas.
The idea of the seas as a common heritage of everyone emerged. That's subsequently become a model for other issues as well. For example, fresh water. Is fresh water a commodity that people get if they can pay for it, or is it a right that is theirs by virtue of being part of humanity? It was going nowhere. The ideas were going nowhere. And that's really when Quakers came into the scene. This wasn't going to be put over anybody, imposed on anybody. It was going to be a collective agreement, and the United States would be part of it.
The Religious Society of Friends as a whole has sought new and creative ways to carry forward their concerns. Public forums, petitions, social and political lobbying, and reform movements became the chosen methods for Quakers to continue their political ideals. Throughout the 19th century, these centered around 5 main concerns which moved Friends to effect reforms first within their religion and then in the wider arena of American politics: ending slavery, fair treatment of Native Americans, women's rights, conflict resolution, and relief for all who suffer.
What makes the Quaker UN work a little bit different from everybody else is you'll have lots of non-governmental organizations in all these settings, but they tend to be organizations that work on one issue, human rights or the environment or development or something like that. They tend to be kind of single-purpose organizations, whereas we work across a range of issues. So we try to work in a not a neutral way, because people know what we stand for. We're not neutral, but we try to work in a kind of impartial way, and we try to work in a way that helps people to reach some kind of new ways of looking at issues. I tend to work on small arms because it's the type of weapon system that's having the most devastating impact in conflict situations. So if one is working for peace, working to reduce conflict, reduce violence, then you need to go after the weapon system that's causing most of it. So that's the reason for working on the small arms issue.
Friends expanded their efforts in the 20th century to include civil rights and environmental concerns. Work on these issues continues into the 21st century. During the 1950s, Quakers became increasingly active in the civil rights movement and currently continue to work with and on behalf of disenfranchised populations, both within the United States and abroad.
I'm from Greensboro, North Carolina, in Guilford County, that is rich with Quaker history. One aspect of that history is, of course, Guilford College in Greensboro, that serves as a center and a touchstone for Quakers. Also, there's Mendenhall Plantation, and that plantation was one of the stops on the Underground Railroad. They even have a wagon there that has a false bottom that was used to carry slaves to the next stop. And Quakers put themselves and families at risk doing this, but it is a very good reminder of the Quaker testimony of equality and helping people that need help in unobtrusive ways, but very effective ways.
Although Quakers believe in quiet diplomacy as a means of achieving positive change, they also recognize the value of peaceful protest.
I'm always sort of more into amazement at the variety of ways in which young people frame the world, and a real curiosity about that than I am in saying people should look one way or look another way. The question is, well, what expression is that? Where's that coming from? How can I understand that? And can I be helpful to that person in terms of nurturing them along a pathway that will be constructive in the long run? Not assuming that my particular way of doing something, or my particular way of dressing, or my particular way of thinking about an issue is the right thing for that person. It comes with that notion that you find God in everyone. I'm very supportive of people protesting, as long as they do it in a way that is nonviolent, and as long as they do it in a way that really brings the issues to the fore.
From non-coercive actions abroad to the stemming of individual violence in families and communities, Quakers continue to press for peaceful measures to accomplish common goals. Many of these efforts are being coordinated by the American Friends Service Committee and the Friends Committee on National Legislation, the earliest religious lobbying organization in Washington, D.C., as well as the Quaker UN office.
Because in Geneva we have a thing called the Conference on Disarmament, which is the body where major multilateral treaties get negotiated. I spend time on nuclear weapons issues and biological weapons issues and other weapons-related questions. I've spent a lot of time on the landmines question in the last few years as well. If you are persistent, you can be trusted, you do your homework, you're professional, you listen, then it's possible, even in some of the most difficult situations, to build up the trust of certain people and to then have an opportunity to make something happen inside the system.
As in all major areas of work undertaken by the UN, there are many aspects to human rights. Because the Office of the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights is located in Geneva, Switzerland, the Quaker UN office in Geneva has followed human rights issues most closely, including focus work on the issues of child soldiers. Committee member Von Kearns is author and head researcher on the Quaker UN office study, The Voices of Girl-Child Soldiers.
A child soldier is a child, and in this case a girl child, who has served as a child soldier prior to reaching the age of 18. We conducted in-depth interviews of the young women so that we could understand what it was, from their point of view, what they needed in order to be demobilized and become part of the civil society once again. For many of them, life was better except for the violence. They could no longer stand the violence and the fighting. But many of them came to be educated, who otherwise would not have had an education. Now, the question is, and what we need to begin to address, why is it that life is better as a soldier? And that's the place where you have to go to be educated, to learn to read, to learn to speak, to learn communication skills. There's something terribly wrong when that's the situation. One of the things that this study did was to listen, and listen in a very in-depth way to these young children. And I think that Quakers are very good at listening, and then helping to provide avenues for reconciliation. And that, to me, seems to be an effort that we should be able to support.
Even though the UN's development budget remains quite limited in comparison to those of other multilateral institutions, it provides a truly democratic forum in which to discuss these issues. As such, the UN touches a chord which lies close to the testimonies and beliefs of Quakers and deserves support.
It's pretty fantastic how much work we sort of squeeze out of ourselves, for very little money.
We look to the worldwide body of friends for support in a number of different ways. Certainly, financial support is always going to be essential.
Because of the religious testimony and willingness of Quakers to seek that of God in every person, the Quaker UN office has been able to gain the confidence of missions and non-governmental organizations alike to assist in creating a peaceful, just, and loving world.
People that are interested in peace, which I hope are many, many, many millions, would be interested in the United Nations for that reason, and then might also be interested in our office because of that.